call it my second movie that I actually starred in. Well, my first movie I actually starred in.
Kristy McNichol was one of the defining stars of her era, an award-winning actress whose face and performances shaped television and film in the late 1970s and 80s. By her teens, she had awards, fame, and a place in television history. But at a point when her career should have only grown bigger, she walked away from everything. What audiences never saw was the personal cost behind that decision. A severe mental breakdown that pushed her to the edge and quietly dismantled the life audiences thought she was living. Now, decades later, rare public sightings have reopened old questions. Fans are asking again, what really happened to Kristy McNichol, and how is she living today? The rise of Kristy McNichol. In the late 1970s, Kristy McNichol became one of the most recognizable young stars in America. She wasn't just popular, she was trusted, admired, and everywhere. Award shows, hit television, major films, magazine covers. But then, just as suddenly, she was gone. And for years, fans were left with no clear explanation until... Born Christina Ann McNichol on September 11, 1962, in Los Angeles, California, Kristy grew up far from the glamour people later associated with her. Her father, James McNichol, worked as a carpenter, while her mother, Carolyn McNichol, took on a string of jobs from secretarial work to sales, whatever she could find, just to keep the household afloat. Money was tight, and stability was never guaranteed. This was a working-class childhood shaped by necessity. Kristy wasn't alone in stepping into adulthood early. Her older brother, Jimmy McNichol, also entered show business young, and together they became financial contributors to the family before most kids their age were worrying about homework. Commercial work came first. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid and it opened doors. Those early jobs taught Kristy how sets worked, how cameras moved, and how to deliver under pressure, skills that would soon define her career. By the early 1970s, Kristy was landing guest roles on popular television shows, including Starsky and Hutch, The Bionic Woman, and Love, American Style. Each appearance placed her in front of millions of viewers and quietly built her reputation as a young actress who could deliver natural, emotionally grounded performances, something rare at her age. Her first real breakthrough came with the NBC series Apple's Way in 1974, where she played Patricia Apple. The show didn't last long, but Kristy stood out. Industry insiders noticed her ability to handle serious material without sounding rehearsed or artificial. That impression carried forward and led directly to the role that would change everything. In 1976, Kristy was cast as Letitia Buddy Lawrence on the ABC drama Family. The series focused on the everyday struggles of a middle-class household, and Kristy's character quickly became its emotional center. She played someone complicated, vulnerable, and often overwhelmed. Audiences recognized themselves in her. The impact was immediate. Family turned Kristy McNichol into a household name and one of the defining teen idols of the late 70s. More importantly, it earned her serious industry respect. She won 2 Primetime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series, first in 1977, then again in 1979. Winning once at that age was remarkable. Winning twice made her a standout in television history. At the same time, Kristy was expanding beyond television. Her film career gained momentum with roles that showed range and confidence. One of her most recognized performances came in Only When I Laugh, which earned her a Golden Globe nomination. By the early 1980s, she was no longer seen as just a TV star. She was a bankable actress with credibility across mediums. Television, however, never left her orbit. Beyond Family, Kristy continued making guest appearances on major shows, maintaining her visibility even as her career diversified. She also stepped into variety programming, hosting and appearing in specials that highlighted another side of her talent. That side became especially visible through her partnership with her brother. In the late 1970s, Kristy and Jimmy formed a singing duo, capitalizing on their shared popularity. In 1978, they released the album Kristy and Jimmy McNichol. The project was a full-scale promotional push that included television appearances and international touring. For a time, Kristy was juggling acting, recording, and live performances, all before turning 20, which is why what came next felt so shocking. Just as her career seemed perfectly positioned for longevity, the momentum slowed, then stopped. Projects disappeared, appearances became rare, and eventually, Kristy McNichol stepped away from the spotlight entirely. Because behind that success was a pace no teenager could control and expectations no one knew how to slow down. The industry kept moving forward, whether she could keep up or not, and eventually, the pressure stopped being invisible. The tragic mental breakdown. Kristy McNichol's rise happened fast, faster than most adults could handle, let alone a teenager. By her mid-teens, she wasn't just acting on a hit TV show. She was carrying emotional storylines, filming long hours, and doing interviews, public appearances, promotional work, and live performances. There was no real separation between work and life. Everything blended together, and there was no pause button. At that age, Kristy didn't have the option to slow things down. She was expected to show up, perform, and stay professional no matter how she felt. Fame arrived before she had time to understand herself, and adulthood came without warning. Years later, she described that period as living life in fast forward, with days and weeks passing without rest, reflection, or recovery. The pressure didn't just come from work. Being labeled a teen idol added another layer. Her image mattered, her behavior mattered. How she looked, how she spoke, and how she handled attention. All of it was watched and judged. There was little room for exhaustion, confusion, or emotional vulnerability. One of the first public signs that something was seriously wrong came while she was filming Just the Way You Are in France. Away from home, under production deadlines, and already worn down, Kristy experienced a severe mental health crisis. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't something she could hide. She later told People magazine, "I hardly slept. I was crying all the time. It was the hardest thing I've ever done to try and get through that film." That statement was an honest description of how bad things had become at the time. Her condition affected the production itself. Filming was interrupted, schedules were disrupted, and concerns spread behind the scenes. For the first time, the public began to see cracks in the image of the dependable young star who could handle anything. What had once been praised as dedication was now clearly taking a serious toll. Even after that experience, Kristy didn't immediately step away from Hollywood. Like many performers, she pushed forward, hoping the worst had passed. But the pattern continued. Long hours, little sleep, emotional swings that were hard to explain, periods of intense productivity followed by complete exhaustion. By the early 1990s, while working on the sitcom Empty Nest, Kristy finally received a diagnosis: bipolar disorder. For Kristy, the diagnosis didn't come as a shock, but as an explanation. It put a name to years of mood swings, emotional crashes, and physical exhaustion that she had been trying to work through without understanding why they kept happening. What others might have dismissed as burnout or stress now had a clear medical reason. But having a diagnosis didn't make working in Hollywood any easier. Television schedules are demanding even for people in perfect health. For someone dealing with bipolar disorder, the pace can be overwhelming. Sleep disruption, pressure to stay camera ready, emotional intensity during scenes, and constant deadlines made stability hard to maintain. Kristy began missing work more frequently, not out of irresponsibility, but because her body and mind couldn't keep up anymore. Eventually, in 1992, she made the difficult decision to leave Empty Nest entirely. Stepping away meant walking away from visibility, income, and momentum, things most actors fight to protect. But staying would have meant ignoring her health, and she had already learned where that led. For years, Kristy kept her diagnosis private. Mental health was rarely discussed openly in Hollywood at the time, especially by someone with her level of fame. Her openness helped reduce stigma around bipolar disorder, especially for fans who had grown up watching her and didn't understand why she vanished so suddenly. But as time passed, Kristy McNichol didn't just step away temporarily from Hollywood, she made a decision that surprised nearly everyone. Instead of waiting for the industry to make space for her, Kristy made a choice most stars never make at the height of recognition. She walked away for good. And the reasons behind that decision revealed just how much her life had already taken from her. Kristy's shocking decision to retire. In 2001, Kristy McNichol shocked fans in a way almost no one saw coming. At an age when most actors are still expanding their careers, she made a clear and final decision. She was done with Hollywood. No comeback plans, no temporary break, no slow fade. Kristy McNichol officially retired from acting, walking away from the industry she had been part of since childhood and leaving behind a career many believed was far from over. At the time, Kristy was only in her late 30s. For fans who remembered her as one of the most recognizable faces of the 1970s and 80s, the decision felt jarring. This was someone who had won major awards as a teenager, carried hit television shows, and proven she could succeed in drama, comedy, and film. From the outside, retirement seemed premature. However, from Kristy's perspective, it was overdue. She made it clear that her decision wasn't about bitterness toward the industry or a lack of opportunity. She stepped away because she wanted to focus on her health and her personal life, two things that had been pushed aside for most of her childhood and adult years. After decades of living on schedules controlled by studios and networks, she wanted control over her own time. By the time she retired, Kristy had been working almost non-stop since she was a child. Commercials, television roles, films, music, and touring. There were very few long breaks. Even during periods when she wasn't on screen, she was preparing for the next job or recovering from the last one. That kind of pace leaves marks, especially on someone who entered the business before fully understanding what it would demand. Exhaustion played a major role in her decision. Not just physical tiredness, but emotional burnout. Acting requires constant emotional access, and for Kristy, that expectation had existed since her teenage years. Over time, it became harder to separate who she was from what she was expected to be on camera. Stepping away wasn't about quitting acting, it was about protecting herself. Another reason why she made the decision to step away was her desire for privacy. Kristy had grown up in front of audiences who felt they knew her. Every career move, every absence, and every return was discussed and analyzed. As she got older, that attention stopped feeling flattering and started feeling intrusive. Retirement gave her something she had never really had before, the ability to live without being watched. During this period, rumors began circulating. Fans speculated about her physical health, wondering if there was a serious illness behind her disappearance. Kristy never confirmed any physical condition beyond what she had already shared publicly about her mental health. The speculation itself only reinforced why she wanted distance. Even silence was being interpreted for her. Perhaps one of the most understated reasons why she walked away from Hollywood was the reality of a changing industry. By the late 1990s, Hollywood had shifted. Studios and networks were increasingly focused on younger stars and faster turnover. While Kristy still had respect, she had no interest in competing in an environment that felt unfamiliar and exhausting. She wasn't chasing relevance. She wasn't trying to reinvent herself for trends she didn't care about. Walking away allowed her to leave on her own terms. After retiring, Kristy didn't disappear from life. She stayed in Los Angeles and began teaching acting classes, working directly with students instead of performing for millions. Teaching allowed her to stay connected to the craft without the pressure that had once overwhelmed her. There were no cameras, no ratings, and no expectations beyond showing up and sharing what she knew. Her days became quieter. She focused on hobbies, spent time with family, and prioritized stability, something that had been difficult to maintain during her years in the spotlight. There were no red carpets, no award shows, and no constant demands on her energy. For Kristy, that kind of normalcy wasn't boring. It was healing. She has largely remained out of the public eye since then. The response to her retirement was emotional. Many fans were shocked. Some were heartbroken. Others expressed admiration. It's not easy to walk away from fame, especially when that fame began so early and shaped your identity. Kristy's decision forced people to reconsider what success actually looks like. Was it staying visible at all costs or choosing well-being over applause? Media outlets at the time often framed her departure as a cautionary tale, another example of how child stardom can take more than it gives. Unlike many similar stories, Kristy's didn't end in public collapse or scandal. It ended with a clear boundary. Her openness about living with bipolar disorder also reshaped how her retirement was understood. Instead of speculation about failure or decline, many began to see her decision as responsible and self-aware. By stepping away, she was doing what Hollywood rarely encourages, stopping before permanent damage is done. And as the years passed, nostalgia only grew stronger. Shows like Family and Empty Nest, along with films like Little Darlings, gained renewed appreciation. Viewers revisiting her work noticed how grounded and sincere her performances were, and how little they relied on gimmicks. Her absence didn't erase her impact, it sharpened it. And yet, long after her retirement, there was one part of her life she hadn't fully shared with the public, something deeply personal that she chose to reveal only when she was ready. Years after leaving Hollywood behind, Kristy made a personal announcement that caught even longtime fans off guard. It was not about acting, not about health, but about love. And the timing of that revelation raised a whole new set of questions. The public announcement that stunned fans. In January 2012, Kristy McNichol surprised fans once again, not with a return to acting, but with a personal announcement many had not expected. After years of living almost entirely outside public view, she publicly shared that she is gay. It was a rare moment of openness from someone who had spent more than a decade deliberately protecting her privacy. Kristy explained that her reason for speaking out was not publicity and not a desire to re-enter public conversation. She said she wanted to help young people who were being bullied because of their romantic choices. At the time, bullying, especially of teenagers, was receiving growing national attention, and Kristy chose to connect her own life experience to that issue, rather than frame the announcement as a personal revelation for its own sake. In her statement, Kristy emphasized that she was content with her life and comfortable with who she was. She described herself as very happy and made it clear that her intention was to offer reassurance to others who might be struggling in silence. The tone was calm and measured, consistent with how she had handled most public matters since retiring from acting. The response to her announcement was immediate. Media outlets reported on the announcement widely, partly because Kristy McNichol had been one of the most recognizable teen idols of the 1970s and 80s. For many fans, she had represented a certain kind of wholesome, emotionally grounded screen presence. Seeing someone from that era speak openly about her sexuality was still uncommon at the time, particularly for stars who had stepped away from Hollywood long ago. Kristy addressed the public reaction directly through People magazine, saying, "I'm overwhelmed with the love and support of my family, friends, and fans." The quote reflected relief more than celebration. It suggested that she had been cautious about how the announcement would be received and grateful that it was met with understanding rather than backlash. Her publicist, Jeff Ballard, also clarified the motivation behind the announcement, stating, "Kristy feels strongly about fighting bullying and intolerance. She realizes that kids don't always have the coping skills to manage their fear and pain when they feel different. And in her own way, she wants to help others by telling people who she is. She hopes that all these small steps together can make a difference." That framing shaped how the story was covered. Rather than focusing on speculation about her past or unanswered questions about her private life, many reports emphasized the broader message she hoped to send. Alongside the announcement, Kristy confirmed that she had been in a long-term relationship with her partner, Marty Allen. The two had been together for decades and had lived quietly in Los Angeles, far from Hollywood's spotlight. There were no public appearances as a couple, no interviews together, and no attempt to place their relationship into the celebrity news cycle. In fact, Kristy's relationship with Alan stands out precisely because of how little it has been publicized. Unlike many former stars whose personal lives were regularly documented, Kristy was never linked to a long list of public romances. Her partnership with Alan remains the only confirmed long-term relationship associated with her name. That consistency aligned with the way Kristy had lived since leaving acting. After retiring in 2001, she avoided interviews, skipped public events, and resisted nostalgia-driven appearances. The 2012 announcement did not change that pattern. It was a statement, not a shift in lifestyle. The fan reactions were largely respectful. Many longtime fans expressed admiration for her honesty, particularly given how much of her life had already been shaped by public expectations. For those who had grown up watching Family, Little Darlings, or Empty Nest, the announcement added context to a career that had ended abruptly years earlier. It helped explain, though not rewrite, why privacy had become so important to her. Advocacy groups also acknowledged her decision to speak out, noting that her choice to connect the announcement to anti-bullying efforts gave it wider relevance. At the same time, Kristy herself did not position herself as an activist figure. She did not go on speaking tours, launch campaigns, or increase her public visibility. Once the statement was made, she returned to her usual quiet life. Most media outlets framed the announcement as both a personal milestone and a public act meant to support others without portraying it as a reinvention or comeback. There was recognition that Kristy had always valued control over her personal boundaries, and that this disclosure did not mean she was inviting further scrutiny. Importantly, even after coming out publicly, Kristy continued to keep details of her daily life minimal. She did not discuss the specifics of her relationship, her routines, or her plans. The focus remained on well-being rather than identity labels or celebrity narratives. That restraint stood out in an era when personal disclosures often led to expanded visibility. Kristy chose the opposite. She shared what she believed was necessary, then stepped back again. For many fans, that decision reinforced what they had already come to understand about her. She does things on her own terms. Whether it was stepping away from acting, prioritizing her health, or speaking publicly only when she felt it served a purpose, Kristy McNichol consistently avoided being pulled back into a role she no longer wanted to play. However, while this announcement answered one question, her recent public reappearance has raised another. How is Kristy McNichol, and what is she currently up to? Is she closing a chapter, or is she quietly testing the waters, deciding whether she might ever step back into public life again? Could Kristy McNichol make a comeback? Today, Kristy McNichol lives in Los Angeles, far from the version of Hollywood she once knew. She shares a quiet life with her longtime partner, Marty Allen, away from red carpets, studio schedules, and public expectations. There are no regular interviews, no social media presence, and no announcements about future projects. That absence is intentional. It reflects the life she chose after stepping away from acting more than 2 decades ago. Kristy still keeps a connection to her craft through teaching, but on her own terms. Outside of that, she spends time on hobbies and routines that have nothing to do with entertainment. Stability, not visibility, appears to be the priority. For years, fans had little idea what her daily life looked like. Then, in 2025, that changed briefly. Photographs surfaced, showing Kristy outdoors in Los Angeles during a casual workout. She was stretching and exercising, dressed simply, without makeup or styling. There was nothing staged about it. The images didn't suggest a comeback or a public appearance. What they showed was something fans hadn't seen in a long time. Kristy McNichol living normally, looking comfortable and healthy. The reaction was immediate. For many fans, the photos were reassuring. After decades of silence and speculation, seeing her active and relaxed answered a question that had lingered for years. She wasn't withdrawn. She wasn't struggling in secret. She was simply living privately. Later that same year, Kristy made an even rarer appearance, this time in a setting tied to her past. She attended a pop culture convention in Los Angeles, one of the few public events she has been seen at in decades. The appearance wasn't promoted in advance, and it didn't involve any announcement or professional obligation. She was there socially, reconnecting with familiar faces. At the event, Kristy was seen warmly greeting and hugging Wendy Wilson of Wilson Phillips. The moment stood out because it felt genuine, relaxed, friendly, and unguarded. For fans watching from a distance, it was a reminder that Kristy still maintains connections within the entertainment world, even if she no longer participates in it. Her appearance sparked conversation online, not because of anything she said or did, but because of how she looked. Kristy wore a red Kansas City Chiefs Mahomes t-shirt and black pants, casual, comfortable, and clearly unconcerned with presentation. Some outlets described her as youthful as ever. Others called her nearly unrecognizable. Those comments weren't rooted in alarm or criticism. They reflected something simpler: time. Kristy McNichol had last been widely visible as a teen idol and young adult star. Seeing her decades later, without the styling and lighting of television, reminded people how long it had been. The surprise came from contrast, not concern. Fans who interacted with her at the convention described her as smiling, engaged, and warm, the same qualities audiences remembered from her screen performances. Taken together, the sightings reassured fans that Kristy is doing well. They also reignited a familiar question: could she ever come back? So far, there is no indication that she plans to. Kristy has not hinted at returning to acting, either on television or in film. Her recent appearances were social and nostalgic, not professional. There were no announcements, no meetings with studios, and no talk of future projects. The events didn't look like a testing of public reaction or a soft re-entry into Hollywood. They looked like brief, controlled, and limited moments of participation. When actors consider comebacks, there are usually signals such as interviews, representation changes, public statements, or carefully chosen roles. None of that is present here. Kristy's life appears steady and settled, not transitional. The choices she has made consistently point away from the demands of a full return. Fans, of course, still speculate, and of course, nostalgia plays a powerful role. For many viewers, Kristy McNichol represents a specific era of television filled with grounded storytelling, emotional honesty, and performances that felt sincere rather than manufactured. The idea of seeing her on screen again is appealing, especially in an industry that often revisits familiar faces. But speculation remains just that. If Kristy were to return, it would likely be in a very limited way, perhaps a small role, a guest appearance, or a project aligned closely with her values. Even then, nothing in her recent behavior suggests that such a move is imminent or even desired. What is clear is that her legacy doesn't depend on a comeback. Fans continue to celebrate her work, revisiting Family, Little Darlings, and Empty Nest with renewed appreciation. Her performances have aged well, in part because they were never built on trends. They were built on presence and restraint, qualities that don't fade easily. Each rare appearance Kristy makes generates excitement precisely because it's rare. She hasn't diluted her image through overexposure or forced relevance. By stepping away when she did, she preserved something many stars lose: dignity and control. So, could Kristy McNichol make a comeback? Technically, yes. She's healthy, respected, and remembered. But based on everything she's shown over the years, the better question may be whether she needs to. For Kristy, stepping away wasn't a pause. It was a conclusion she chose, and one she seems at peace with. And for fans, seeing her content, grounded, and living on her own terms may be the most satisfying ending of all. Would you like to see Kristy McNichol make a comeback to the big screen? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.